The rain had just begun when Edward Sinclair stepped out of his black sedan, the rhythmic drizzle dimpling the gravel driveway of his coastal property. The sea wind carried the scent of salt and pine, familiar and strangely unwelcome. He hadn't been to the Brighton house in years, too many business trips, too much pretense of importance. Yet here it stood, quiet under a grey sky, with smoke curling from its chimney. That was the first thing that unsettled him. Smoke. Someone was living here. Earlier that morning, a neighbor, a talkative widow named Mrs. Dunn, had greeted him with cheerful recognition and a touch of gossip. "Lovely young couple you've rented to, Mr. Sinclair. Always keeping the place tidy." Edward had merely nodded, concealing his confusion. He'd never rented this property to anyone. It was his late brother's inheritance, a sentimental afterthought in his real estate portfolio. A house for no one, really, a place he never expected to mean anything. Now, as he approached the porch, he saw signs of life that didn't belong to him: 2 bicycles leaning against the wall, a pair of muddy boots by the mat, and through the window, the faint shadow of someone moving inside that he hesitated before knocking, his gloved hand hovering midair. For a man accustomed to control, of assets, of people, of outcomes, uncertainty was intolerable. He knocked twice, firm but polite. The door opened, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the face before him: Liam Carter, his nephew. The boy he'd last seen 3 years ago, leaving the family estate with a suitcase and tear-stained defiance. The boy who had said, voice shaking but resolute, "I can't pretend anymore." Now, standing before him, Liam looked older, sharper around the edges, his hair longer, his confidence quieter. Recognition flared in his eyes, followed swiftly by dread. "Uncle Edward," he breathed, his voice small. Edward straightened, his instinctive mask of composure falling into place. "Liam," he said coolly. "You seem to be occupying my house." A voice from inside called, "Who's that?" and another figure appeared behind Liam, a man, perhaps in his late 20s, holding a paintbrush and wearing an old shirt splattered with color. His presence said everything Edward needed to deduce. Liam's boyfriend. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between them was thick with unfinished sentences and years of unspoken disapproval. Edward finally said, "May I come in?" Liam hesitated, glancing at the man behind him, who gave a cautious nod. "Yes, of course," Liam murmured, stepping aside. The warmth of the interior hit Edward immediately: soft lighting, faint music, a lingering scent of coffee and oil paint. The house, once empty and impersonal, had transformed. There were framed sketches on the wall, a bookshelf crowded with novels, and a large canvas in progress resting against the far wall. It was not grandeur, it was home. Edward removed his gloves with precision, scanning the space as if it might confess a crime. "You've made yourself quite comfortable," he said. Liam clasped his hands nervously. "I didn't know it was still yours. It was empty for years. I thought," he faltered, searching for words. "I thought no one cared about it." Edward's expression softened briefly, almost imperceptibly. "And the young man?" Liam glanced toward the artist, who offered a tentative smile. "This is Noah James," Liam said quietly. "We've been together for a while." Noah stepped forward politely. "It's good to meet you, sir. We keep the place in good shape. We can move out if—" "That won't be necessary," Edward interrupted, his voice smooth but detached. He walked toward a window, watching the drizzle turn to a steady rain. His reflection wavered against the glass, an aging man in a tailored coat, surrounded by color and warmth he couldn't claim. Something twisted within him. He had come prepared to assert ownership, perhaps even to threaten eviction. Yet, looking around, he felt displaced, not as the landlord, but as the intruder. He turned back, his tone softer. "You've changed, Liam. I didn't expect to find you here, of all places." Liam met his gaze for the first time. "I didn't expect you to care." The word struck harder than either intended. A long pause followed. The rain deepened outside, filling the silence that neither could bridge. Edward finally said, "Keep the house for now. We'll sort out the details later." He reached for his coat. "You've made it," something I never managed to. Liam blinked. What do you mean? Edward gave a faint, almost wistful smile. A home. Then he turned and left, his figure dissolving into the rain. From the window, Liam watched him go, the taillights fading into the gray horizon. Noah slipped his hand into his, sensing the storm beneath his calm expression. Liam whispered, half to himself, why now? Outside, the rain answered in quiet rhythm, each drop marking the beginning of something neither of them yet understood. 3 days passed before Liam Carter received the letter. It arrived in a cream-colored envelope with his name written in Edward's immaculate handwriting. The message was brief, deliberate. Dinner at my residence, Friday evening. You and Mr. James are both invited. E.S. No explanation. No apology. Only the authority of a man accustomed to obedience. Liam reread the note several times, torn between curiosity and unease. Noah James, drying paintbrushes at the sink, glanced over his shoulder. Let me guess. The uncle summons his subjects? Liam smiled faintly. Something like that. He wants us to come to dinner. Noah frowned. Why would he? He barely spoke to you the other day. I don't know, Liam admitted. Maybe he feels guilty. Noah muttered, or maybe he wants something. Still, Friday came. And against better judgment, they went. The Sinclair estate was everything the Brighton house wasn't, vast, elegant, and airless. When the butler led them through the marble foyer, Liam felt small again, the way he had as a child visiting his father's older brother, the man who commanded silence with a single glance. Edward greeted them in the dining room, wearing a tailored gray suit and a faint smile that revealed nothing. Liam. Noah. I'm glad you came. His wife, Clara Sinclair, rose from her chair to greet them. She was poised and graceful, her smile warmer than her husband's but touched with curiosity. It's lovely to finally meet you, Liam. Edward's spoken of you before. Liam's brows lifted slightly. Has he? Edward's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. A long time ago, he said. Please, sit. Dinner began with polite conversation, travel, art, business. Edward asked questions with measured interest, Noah answered cautiously. Clara filled the silences with effortless charm, though her gaze often drifted toward her husband, studying him as if he were a stranger. It was during dessert, when the butler had withdrawn and the candles burned low, that the tone shifted. Edward turned to Liam. You seem content, he said quietly. I didn't expect that. Liam set down his fork. You expected me to be what? Miserable? Edward's eyes met his, sharp, assessing, yet strangely vulnerable. Not miserable. Lost. Noah stiffened beside him. He's not lost, he said evenly. He's found his place. The remark hung between them like smoke. Edward didn't reply, he only sipped his wine, his thoughts moving somewhere unreachable. Clara broke the silence, her voice smooth. Edward's always been curious about people who choose differently. It makes him uncomfortable, but also, fascinated. Clara, Edward warned, his tone soft but edged. She smiled faintly, unbothered. It's true, isn't it? Edward looked at her for a long moment, then rose from his chair. Liam, he said, ignoring the remark, I'd like to show you something before you leave. My study. You might appreciate it. Liam hesitated, then followed. Noah stayed behind with Clara, who poured more wine and began asking him about his paintings. The study smelled faintly of leather and old paper. Heavy drapes filtered the lamplight into a golden hush. On the walls hung paintings, landscapes, portraits, fragments of lives frozen in brushstrokes. Edward stopped before one canvas. It depicted a young man, shirt unbuttoned, eyes soft with defiance. Liam spoke first. Who is he? Edward's voice lowered. Someone I once loved. The air shifted that he continued, we were young. I had a future to protect. He didn't. His lips curved in a sad half-smile. So I chose the future. And I've been living inside it ever since. Liam studied the painting. Does your wife know? Edward nodded faintly. She suspects. She always has. Silence. Only the clock ticking, steady and merciless. Edward turned toward him, eyes reflecting the lamplight. You remind me of him. Not in looks, something else. You live without apology. Liam's throat tightened. That's not always easy. No, Edward said softly. But it's honest. For a moment, something unspoken flickered between them, recognition, not attraction exactly, but the dangerous closeness of two men separated by time and regret. Edward looked away first, clearing his throat. I envy you, Liam. You shouldn't, Liam replied. You have everything. Edward gave a low laugh, tired and hollow. Everything that doesn't matter. A knock at the door, Clara's voice. They're ready to leave. Edward turned back to the painting. Tell me, he said quietly, if you could go back and change nothing, would you still have chosen love? Liam hesitated. Every time. Edward smiled faintly. Then I suppose you're braver than I ever was. Outside, the rain had returned, soft and steady. Edward watched from the doorway as Liam and Noah walked toward their car, headlights glowing against the dark. Clara joined him, her voice low. You look at him the way you once looked at that painting. Edward didn't answer. When the car disappeared down the drive, he whispered almost to himself, he's living the life I was too afraid to claim. Clara turned to him. Then maybe it's time you asked why. Edward said nothing. But the question lingered, long after the lights of the car had faded into the rain. The days that followed blurred into a careful routine, but Daniel could not shake the feeling that every moment carried hidden weight. He still laughed at Michael's dry jokes, still helped fold laundry, still joined him at Sunday dinners with Michael's parents. Yet beneath the surface, each action felt rehearsed, as if he were playing a role in a play where one wrong line could shatter the set that he thought the guilt might dull with time, but instead, it sharpened. The silence between them, once merely dull, now pulsed with accusation. Every time Michael smiled without suspicion, Daniel felt both relief and dread. Relief that his secret remained buried, dread that he was building a life on a fault line that could erupt without warning. One evening, Daniel found himself staring at Michael as he read on the sofa, glasses perched lightly on his nose, a lamp casting a soft halo around him. Michael looked peaceful, almost boyish in his concentration. Daniel felt his throat close, the thought rising unbidden, I don't deserve him. The weight of that truth made him set down his drink, his hand trembling slightly. Later that night, he dreamt of Ethan. Not of the act itself, but of the way Ethan had looked at him across the bar, like he mattered, like he was still capable of sparking desire. When he woke, the image lingered, and Daniel wondered which haunted him more, the betrayal itself, or the fact that part of him longed for that validation again. At work, he struggled to focus. Deadlines slipped by, and colleagues noticed his distracted air. His sketches lacked their usual boldness, his presentation stumbled. When his manager asked if everything was all right, Daniel forced a smile and claimed he was just tired. It was the same lie he told Michael, the same mask he wore for everyone who couldn't see the fracture beneath. One night, while clearing away dinner plates, Michael asked casually, "Are you happy?" The question landed with such force that Daniel nearly dropped the dishes. He managed a laugh, shaky and forced. Of course. Why wouldn't I be? But Michael's eyes lingered on him, searching, as though he sensed a shift he couldn't name. Daniel retreated to the balcony afterward, the night air cool against his skin. He realized then that secrecy had a way of isolating, of fencing him off from the very person he lived with. Michael's presence was steady, but Daniel felt increasingly apart, as though the secret had built a wall invisible to anyone else. That he began to notice cracks in Michael too. The long hours, the exhaustion etched into his features, the way his laughter came less easily these days. Perhaps they had both been drifting long before Ethan entered the picture. Perhaps the betrayal was not the cause but the symptom of something neither had confronted, yet the thought offered no comfort. It only made the silence heavier. One weekend, they attended a friend's birthday party. Surrounded by chatter and clinking glasses, Daniel watched Michael interact with old university friends, animated and relaxed in a way Daniel hadn't seen in months. He realized with a pang that Michael was still capable of lightness, still capable of connection. The problem wasn't Michael alone, it was the distance Daniel had allowed to grow between them. Walking home, Michael slipped his arm through Daniel's, a gesture so familiar it nearly broke him. Daniel forced a smile, but inside, he was unraveling. He wanted to confess, to lay the truth bare and see whether their relationship could withstand the weight. But fear held him back. Fear of destroying what little remained, fear of becoming the villain in a story they had once built together. That night, lying awake again, Daniel understood something he hadn't before. The secret wasn't going away. It had embedded itself in their life, shaping his choices, coloring his thoughts, shadowing every tender moment. And unless he faced it, through confession, or change, or some reckoning yet unknown, it would consume not only his love for Michael but also the version of himself he still wanted to be. The echo of that night with Ethan no longer lived only in memory, it lived in every silence, every hesitation, every breath beside the man he loved.